With your brain being something that correlates repetition to the perfection of an activity, there's only one true way to get good at pretty much anything you do in life. The best way to perfect anything, whether that be just getting a good body, being a chess master, being a great painter, or even getting good grades in school, the trick is not actually to practice, because there are a few extra tips that you might not know about that will change the way you go about activities. For me, I surely didn't know about these things when I was doing stuff at an inefficient rate that caused me not to succeed. I'm going to show you exactly how you can use this and how you can apply it. So if you've ever wanted to be good at reading, lifting, science, getting good grades, then you will definitely want to use these tips. There are three main things you need to know if you want to get good at anything fast: practice without practicing, and my favorite thing, because it's helped me do a lot of work fast, is studying faster. So these three tips that I'm about to show you in this video are going to help you achieve those things. Okay, so with tip number one, I really recommend you guys use this a lot, because that's what I do, and it bumps up my skill level within just like 10 to 20 minutes. Let's go back to my 8th grade year when I did long jump in track. I wasn't too good, but I still placed second in my school for long jump, and I think there are only 2 people doing long jump. I skipped 9th grade track, and then I did winter track in 10th grade. So keep in mind that winter track is probably about 2 months long, so there's not much time to perfect a single event, and if you're doing multiple, like, you're just not gonna perfect it. So I went into winter track not really knowing which event to do until this 70-year-old coach came up to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. He's like, "Hey son, you're a tall kid, you should do hurdles." So what do? I'm just gonna do hurdles. Whatever he says is fine. And if you're not sure what hurdles are, it's pretty much sprinting at this wall that falls over when you hit it, and it's kind of really scary. So since I joined the hurdles team, I go home and I research for about 40 minutes just on hurdles. And I'm not just watching races, I'm not just dilly-dallying when researching. I'm watching every single technique that the professionals do, and I'm trying to copy them the next day to get good fast. I'm not trying to wait a year to get good. So after watching those videos and researching, I get pretty good at hurdles with just a few weeks of practice, and I think I missed a month of practice by accident. But yeah, just a few weeks and I'm already beating everyone. So suppose you aren't doing sports and you want to apply some effective techniques to things like studying or getting good grades. I'm about to show you exactly how to do that. And it's also not just about doing it, it's about doing it in the most effective way possible, as you guys have seen from my hurdles example. Okay, so tip number 2, don't focus on the outcome, only focus on that income. Focusing on that outcome will only distract you from what you need to do to get there. So that's what this tip is about. This is something that I see all the time when people fail to do their New Year's resolutions. It is so simple, and it's just a simple fix, but that's probably for another video. But today we're going to be talking about Sage Zhuangzi, which is a Taoist that came up with a pretty important concept that I think you guys should know. So what is that concept from Sage Zhuangzi? So the concept that he came up with is that when you're not focused on that outcome or competition, you do your best. And you're probably thinking that competition gets out the best in you, but that's kind of where it's debatable. So here is Sage Zhuangzi's points. When you stop worrying about that outcome, you become that action you are doing. Suppose you're doing archery, you want to become that single shot you fire. You want to focus so much that with any negative consequence that happens, it just doesn't matter to you. The moment you start worrying about that outcome, your thoughts will just cloud and you won't be able to focus on the one action that you need to succeed at what you're doing. So it's almost as if it's proportional to the negative consequence. The amount you do bad is proportional. Let me give you an example of that, because I probably didn't say that right. Suppose you're in the Olympics for archery. I mean, one second you're watching this YouTube video and the next you're in Olympics for archery. Who would have known? So you're in the Olympics and you have so much pressure on you that if you do bad, there's just so much negative consequences, like you might get kicked off the team, or you might just have a bad reputation. In another situation where you're just at practice and maybe your mom's watching, there's not that much pressure, so you're probably gonna do a lot better, unless your mom is a super mean person. So the point that Sage Zhuangzi brings home is that you should just focus on that input. What you really want to do to come back to Sage Zhuangzi's point is make a list of habits and things that you need to do to achieve that outcome, instead of just constantly worrying about how to get there. And that's more of on a practical level, while Sage Zhuangzi's idea is more of when you're in a competition or doing something that is highly competitive, or just anything important for that matter. For those of you that do weightlifting or any type of sport, this one will really change the way you do that because you can fix your form and you can even practice without practicing. You want to visualize for success. You can visualize yourself walking into that testing room and taking that test so you don't get nervous when it actually happens. So here's a study that shows visualization actually works. So researchers took a group of 144 people that played basketball, one group being for visualization, one group being for physical practice. Now, this lasted a few weeks. So the visualization group would spend 30 minutes just shooting in their mind. They would visualize themselves shooting, while the physical group would spend 30 minutes just shooting hoops in real life. Now, what came out is actually crazy because both groups had pretty much the same results. They both just improved the same amount somehow. So as you guys have seen, you can also visualize for success instead of just researching beforehand. For those of you that actually want to apply this visualization tip, I'd recommend doing it before bed because 1, you're staying away from screens before bed, and 2, it's probably the easiest way to do it, and it's just something that you can do if you want to create a habit. Just pick a time and do that. We're about to get into tip 3 where it becomes more focused on studying, but this also applies to sports. But before we do get into tip 3, why does visualization work? So let's look at some brain science. There's something called myelin that speeds up the reaction of the neurons. When researchers tested a group of rats, they found that the more repetition they do of a certain activity, the more myelin is produced, making the neurons go faster, and I believe this is what we call muscle memory. As you guys have probably figured out by now, it is not just the amount of time you practice, it's also how much effort you put into that practice and making that effort as efficient as possible. So you want to target your weaknesses, which is kind of hard to do because it's hard to see your weaknesses, but something that everyone can get good at is hyper focus when working. This tip number 3 goes over how to study faster and more efficiently, and it really saved me a whole lot of time, and I hope you guys find this useful because you can decrease your time for studying just so much if you just use deep work and don't use distracted work. Let's look at some different types of work when working so you can optimize your focus. That brings us to tip number 3, allow for distractions but not when working. This is just so obvious when you hear it. I'm sure you've had this advice many times over, but do you actually apply it properly? So looking at the 2 types of work that nobody seems to actually know, 1 being distracted and 2 being deep work. Everyone wants to achieve that deep work, but most people, especially in school, seem to be in that distracted state. Distracted work is pretty self-explanatory. It's just working at a slower and decreased efficiency because of your distractions and lack of focus. One thing you may not even realize if you don't have a strategy for this is you're just working and you just check your phone when working and then go back to work. Now, you don't realize that this breaks your focus and it breaks your flow state. Something that makes me mad is when people say they study for 2 hours when in reality, if they're just checking their phone once, it's breaking their focus and concentration. And I'm sorry to say, you're just lying if you check your phone just once during that time because you didn't study for 2 hours straight. You probably studied for 1 hour 58 minutes with decreased focus. So why is 1 hour 58 minutes so bad? Well, the thing is you're getting out of that flow state, and flow state being when time just goes by and your effort is almost effortless, when in reality it's actually hard if you weren't in that flow state. You may have never even achieved flow state when working, so take a look at this chart. It pretty much describes that difficulty plays a huge role in it, and if you're just not focused, you just can't get in that flow state. So how do you get in that flow state where work just becomes easy? This is where the second type of work comes in, deep work. This is pretty much just a different name for flow state, where it's an extended period of time where you're working with no distractions at all. So I have a few tips for you on how to achieve this. Tip number 1, set a timer, work for that amount of time, and do not check anything. Do not check your phone, do not watch ads, do not do anything in that time except for work. And when that timer rings, you're lucky enough to be able to use your phone again. Now, one tip, I pretty much already said it, but so many people just have that excuse. Like, what if something pops up? What if I need to check what's trending on Twitter? Like, come on. What if someone texts you urgently? Okay, then set a 20-minute timer. Just work for 20 minutes. They can wait 20 minutes if they're dying. I don't know. If it was really an emergency, they wouldn't call you. Okay, that was kind of off track, but the number one thing that I use personally is the Pomodoro method combined with the Parkinson's law. Now, there's a video that explains it perfectly up here, and if you don't know what it is, it's pretty much deep work combined with the law that states how to get work done fast. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you can put some use to this video, so good luck.
There.